What is your higher purpose? Whether you're on or off the tables, your higher purpose is your North Star. It guides your values, your goals, and your decisions, and goes above and beyond just making money and living comfortably. It goes much deeper than wanting to be good at poker and proving you're worthy of being loved. The higher purpose is your guiding light. So when things get tough, uncomfortable, or unclear, you know exactly who to be and what to do. Even if you don't know your higher purpose, the first and most consistent step to get you there is to step into discomfort at every opportunity. It's easy to make the safe play or the comfortable choice. There are many payoffs in wanting to continue doing the same things in order to stay in the same place. How many of you believe that you have to be like everyone else in order to get the results you want? Perhaps you believe if you change or feel drastically different, you'll lose your abilities or your love for the game. Is it easier to identify as a poker player because it makes you someone as opposed to no one or a loser? And maybe it's just easier to be a victim to the coolers and the downswings because living in 100% accountability is that much harder. When our intention is to maintain our spiritual, mental, emotional, and physical comfort, it shows in our play. Avoiding discomfort off the table means we avoid discomfort on the table. We make the safe fold or the standard call because that's what everyone else would do. Even though deep down we know the right play, we refuse to go there. We sell out ourselves and our own inner wisdom and intuition just to go with the crowd. And as we are about to see, when we lose the higher purpose, when our sole intention is to maintain our safety and comfort, our results let us know. What happens at the table mirrors back to us the exact thoughts, feelings, and beliefs that we've been dismissing, avoiding, or ignoring within. And it's up to us to either keep doing what we're doing or look in the mirror. What gets in the way of the higher purpose? Unacknowledged resistance. What you resist persists, and that's exactly what we're about to see in this vlog. When we're feeling things coming up, the need to make money, the need to prove ourselves, need to play perfect and avoid mistakes, we either acknowledge it or we avoid those thoughts and feelings and they will speak louder, wanting to be heard through our decisions at the table. When we avoid those thoughts and feelings, we're telling ourselves that they're real. Our unconscious actually believes them, and then we make the safe or the standard decision because what we're telling ourselves is, I'm unsafe. When we acknowledge those thoughts and feelings, on the other hand, they dissipate. Poker is a game like any other that will immediately trigger the visceral, primal fear into reality. Why? Because of the exchange of money. To professional players especially, making money equals making a living. And what the unconscious mind hears is living equals survival. So within each hand, whether we perceive it or not, there is some implication of life or death, emotional life or death, especially if our thoughts and feelings go unacknowledged for too long. So as you watch this, reflect on your own game and take the opportunity to notice whether you acknowledge what comes up for you or you ignore those things, and notice the difference in what happens when you do each of those things. All right, so in this first hand, stand-up game is on, everybody's standing. The typical adjustment in this game is that there's much more limping pre-flop to keep the pot small and avoid getting squeezed. But also they want to try to win the pot and avoid paying the bounty, but ultimately they're doing it while playing as safe as possible. Except for maybe one or two regs who could squeeze with any two cards. These players have very defined standard squeezing ranges, like, for example, ace-5, ace-4, ace-3, ace-2, maybe suited gappers, pocket pairs they could go either way with, and Broadway cards. Post-flop, these players are going to stab and give up or barrel when the board triggers them into action or attachment to the pot. Otherwise, they're looking to get to showdown at all costs, so their big barrels will be polarized. All right, so in this first hand, we get 9-9 in the blinds. It's stand-up game. Everybody's standing. and we raise it up to 300. We want to get a little more value for our premium hand here versus their limping ranges. And so on an 8-5-4 flop, why are we checking here? We're checking because, one, we see capped or slight excitement. So we know that likely he has maybe overcards or some type of gut shot, but we can tell that he's not really happy with his hand. And then number two, he's disconnected from the board. So that tells us either the board didn't help him or he barely connected. So if we bet, he's going to fold. And when we check in this game, like we said, it's going to induce him into one street auto stab. Now, since we know these players are not going to be barreling, we want to get our value on the flop because that's when their ranges are the widest. So we check raise here to 650, and he's going to call. And on the king of clubs turn, what do we see? We see that his energy stays about the same or maybe dropped a little bit. So we know that the king didn't help him. We know that the clubs didn't help him. And we still have a hand that's pretty vulnerable versus whatever equity he has. So we're going to bet here 1100 and he's going to fold. So we show our hand for a stand-up game. We get to sit down first. All right, so hand number two, stand-up game is still on. We're sitting. This was shortly after the first hand. So we have a early limp, and then we have a regular who's going to raise it to 120 in the hijack, and we get a premium here, ace-king in the small blind. And the question we want to ask ourselves in this hand is, what is our intention? It's really easy to create reasons, poker strategy reasons that are driven by emotion, start fighting for a pot just because we have a premium, it's our pot, the board came queen high and this is a good barrel board. So we just want to check in with ourselves and say, is my strategy for this hand coming from a place of attachment, that this is my hand and I want to fight for this pot and I need to prove things and I can barrel this guy off it? Is it coming from thoughts of scarcity, or are we playing from a place of connection? So on this board, Queen 7-5, what we see from him is we see that he has a slight energy increase, and we also see that he is semi-connected to the board. So in this dynamic with the stand-up game versus his regular, even though he's checking and playing it safe, that doesn't mean that he's not going to be calling barrels and fighting for the pot. Just because he wants to go to showdown doesn't mean that he's not going to defend against a range that looks like it could very easily be ace-king when we start barreling. So we get to have the emotional discipline here to check down or check fold when we know we aren't going to triple. Could we triple? Yeah, we could put him to a decision for his stack for 10,000 here, but my intention is to flow with what is. And with this player versus the connection that I see with his energy and connection to the board, and with this specific dynamic with the stand-up game, we know that he has more of a propensity to fight. And so we're just going to flow with what is and just let this hand go. There's no need to force a spot. And ultimately, when I ignore what's coming up internally, which would be to fight for this pot, it starts building resistance, which is going to show up as that attachment to the pot or the stack. So he ends up rivering a straight, and we lose the minimum and move on to the next hand. All right, so hand number three. This is a little while later. Stand-up game is off now. Everybody's sitting. We get king, jack of hearts under the gun. Why are we limping here? We're limping because this is a game where if we open under the gun, we're going to be getting multiple callers because, as we've said, these players want to try to win the pots, but they're going to be doing it as safely as possible, which means they're not going to be three betting. They're going to be calling to see flops. So we limp here to induce a play which is well within their comfort zone, which is to open. And then the other players are playing within their comfort zone, which is to call. So we get an open and two calls, and then we're going to squeeze, follow through with our plan. Now, the sizing is a little bit small. We end up getting called here by all the players. So now we are out of position in a four-way pot, and this is not what we want. We want to choose a squeeze size that gets called by one player. One player, we can easily barrel him off on this board if we are connected to him and see that he's marginally connected. But on this board, even though this is a spot that some of the thoughts are saying, like, well, okay, we have a blocker to ace king, we have a blocker to pocket jacks, and they have ranges that shouldn't be able to stand barrels. This is just a spot to me that shows poker is much more of an art than a science. If we're playing a game, we could probably check raise this flop and barrel when we see that the player's excitement is capped, obviously depending on our stack size. It's going to make our hand look super strong, and it's going to factor right into their belief that, like, that's how it would play a big hand. So as played here, if we're playing our A game and if we're deep enough and if we connect to the opponents and we don't see that they're in fight mode would be a 6.5 or greater on a scale of 1 to 10 in terms of excitement and intensity, then it's totally cool to go ahead and check raise here and barrel them off, because that's exactly how they think that we would play jacks, ace king, ace queen, ace jack. But out of position, four way, it's totally cool to fold this here. All right, so a little bit later, we get pocket queens in the small blind. And this is just going to be, there's nothing really to talk about in this hand. Poker wise, we just get a short stack to jam against us with pocket threes and we end up holding. But the important thing to talk about is, even though I won this hand, I was still feeling dissatisfied within and I didn't acknowledge it. So whatever happens on the outside can't give me the satisfaction or safety I'm looking for, because the thoughts and beliefs are saying I'm unsafe right now. So it's something that can only be resolved within. This hand just temporarily quells that voice for a moment. Where is it coming from? A couple previous hands didn't barrel the reg on the queen high board. That didn't feel great. And then having the hand where I misclicked pre-flop and ended up check folding on a flop. So a couple losing pots that didn't go my way made me feel not very good. And I chose to ignore what I was feeling and experiencing within. And so a lot of times we look on the outside to feel better, and this hand just goes to show that nothing on the outside can make us feel better on the inside. And as we see, since I started ignoring what was going on within, things are going to start to go off the rails. All right, so coming up right here, we have just the purest dead money spot, but we can see if internally we're ignoring things and we're not giving those things permission to exist, we're telling ourselves, I'm unsafe. And when we feel unsafe within, then we play safe at the table. So pre-flop, there's a limp, a raise, and then we choose to squeeze to 250. Could have gone a little bit bigger, and then we get called by both players. So the rule is, if we feel that we're resisting putting our stack at risk, then we're missing dead money. So when we get called here by this reg on this flop, he doesn't have any value hands that we beat, and he likely has some type of hand like maybe ace four or ace deuce or like queen jack, and this is based on our connection. Connection and focus equals the strength of his hand. So when we see that his excitement is capped and he's disconnected, it means that he's attached to his stack. So ultimately in this spot, aggressive action for multiple streets is the bread and butter. So this will work because we see capped excitement and disconnected from the board. But because I was operating through the thoughts and feelings of unsafety, I am end up going to take the most basic straight ahead action in the moment, which is either check, call down, or check, fold. And so as I ignored and resisted what I was feeling within, fearful thoughts, being unsafe, I'm not good enough, my comfort zone shrinks to whatever is most basic, which here is check, fold. And this all day here on this turn is could check raise and barrel, or could just triple. This is the purest dead money spot there is. And this shows you what state I'm in. If I'm not embracing aggression and putting these players to decision, then I am playing safe and I'm attached to my stack. And as we can see, ignoring what is within is causing us to play C game or worse. All right, so in this next hand, this is a good opportunity to check in with yourselves and the way that you show up at the table, because this hand is a good example of the pendulum. The pendulum, emotional pendulum, will swing back and forth between I need to play it safe and I need to fight to prove myself. And so as we saw in the previous couple of hands, I was playing it safe. And so now what's happening internally is, okay, I need to do something poker wise in order to feel better inside. And we know that doesn't work. And what happens is we're going to play out of alignment. So we go from I need to play it safe to I need to make something happen so that I don't feel unsafe anymore. And so poker wise, that means barreling a board and a player that I'm supposed to barrel while ignoring the process of connecting to the opponent. I was playing through desperation and I was doing what was most comfortable in the moment in order to feel better. So the question to ask here is, what's our intention? How do we create clarity and awareness in the moment? And then how do we clear out whatever energy is coming up? What is that voice asking for from within that we're actively avoiding resisting? And the more that we resist, the more that voice will act out at the table by actively sabotaging. He'll say, you won't listen to me when I'm talking to you, then I'll make you listen through poker. And so as you can see, we try to barrel a guy that is just at the top of his range because the thoughts are saying, I need to win this pot to feel better. And it's just completely out of alignment. So you can see we're completely off the rails here. All right, so this next hand is a very basic hand. We raised to 80 with pocket queens, and we have a regular-ish, more like button clicking, casual-ish type reg on our left, and he's going to three bet us to 300. And what he's doing here is he's three betting in position with hands that could be disguised and could smash post flop. He's not doing it to fight for the pot, as you can see that he folds immediately to a very small four bet. But the important thing about this hand is I remember how deeply dissatisfied I was because I was still refusing to acknowledge the buildup of all the emotion. So I'm constantly searching on the outside for something good to happen, but no matter what the result, still dissatisfied. And so what happened after the hand was it triggered my voice of judgment, which is I should have flatted, I should have four bet smaller, I should have. So I'm like constantly looking for things on the outside that's like, well, I fucked up. And so if I did something different, then I would feel better. But notice now there's so much charge around each hand because this ignored buildup of thoughts and feelings is spilling over. All right, I got a couple more hands for you guys, and it's about to get much worse. So one interesting thing to bring up here is this player that does the early limp. I was a bit triggered by him, and I didn't notice it when he sat down, or I did notice it, but I ignored it. And what I was triggered by was basically like this guy sat down to have fun. He's playing casually. He's from out of town. Like he just had great energy. But because I was in a state where I was like needing to prove myself, I didn't feel good or whatever, his joyful state triggered what I was resisting within. And so what's going to happen here is I get triggered into fighting him. And this is a good opportunity to, when you're at the table, everybody is your mirror. And so you can ask yourself, like, what is this person reflecting back to me? And in this case, it was reflecting back to me that I wasn't in a fun, joyful state. And how dare he be in a fun, joyful state? So that's what triggered me. So at this point, I'm playing out of a deep desire to make something happen so that I can feel better within. On the surface, this looks like a really good double barrel spot. We squeeze here, we get called by this player. And the point here is I didn't double here because it's a good spot in a vacuum. It looks like we have the range advantage, and then we get equity on the turn. But notice that doing what's standard isn't necessarily what's safest, right? Sometimes safe means I don't want to risk any chips, and other times safe means doing what's standard here. So me doing what's standard here was most safe for me in the moment. So not barreling and giving up here would be the risky play for me, because if I fold and he shows me a marginal hand that I couldn't gotten to fold, it would have just sent my voice of judgment through the roof. So notice it's not actually about the money. Although it looks like I'm being aggressive, what I'm actually doing is whatever will make me feel most safe in the moment, which is avoiding the voice of judgment in my mind. But ultimately, by avoiding the thoughts within, like we said, what we resist persists. And I drive myself right into the result that will trigger what I'm feeling inside, that I'm unsafe, that I'm not good enough, that I don't have enough, and that I'm a loser. So we double here into a guy that flopped a set. So notice how we're completely ignoring connection. And notice this guy immediately checks back a set on this pretty safe river. So we see he's here to have fun. He's casual. He's not here to fight for pots. So the takeaway here is when we don't acknowledge our own energy and emotion or the vortex of thoughts that's taking place, it will quite literally do whatever it takes to confirm the deeper belief or the trigger that we are desperately trying to ignore. And in this case, you see, we go and we lose the max versus someone who's at the top of the range because the underlying belief is, I need to prove that I'm unsafe, and that's what we create. All right, so last hand here. Still have not cleared anything out, so we're still in the same state of being that we were before. But notice how you react when you get big hands at the table. Because for me, I know that a big hand is a trigger for me. I go, oh my God, a big hand, finally, especially when I'm in a state like this. So I automatically am building attachment to what I perceive to be my saving grace. This hand is finally going to get me out of the state I'm in. And so what we do is we create attachment to it. And then especially the way that we are playing this hand pre-flop, you can see there's late position raise by a reg. We call flat, disguise our hand. Our friend from the previous hand makes it 160 in the small blind, and then we back raise to 700, and he calls. So pre-flop is great. Just notice that when we tend to play hands quirky, we build attachment to the hand. And without bringing awareness and acknowledgement to the attachment we've created, well, we're going to see how that plays out for me, and notice how that plays out for you also. So on a Jack 9-5 flop, we can see that he donks 1,000. And at this point, I'm not applying my connection process because what I'm experiencing internally is my heart rate and breathing and my mind is racing. Everything is just sped up and fast because I've created emotional attachment to this hand and attachment to the outcome. So I can't even hear my thoughts in this moment. But even without connection, a donk on this board is exactly what it looks like. Some type of hand like top pair, maybe pocket tens, pocket queens, something where he's like, I want to control the size of the pot. So we correctly raise here on the flop. We want to keep getting money in. Raise size could be a little bit bigger. We want to make it so that we can get stacks in by the river. So on the turn, we get the one card that we do not want to see, ace of clubs. So we make the correct play here. There's nothing that we're getting value from more hands here on the turn, so we check here. Now, I can blame the deck. How does he hit an ace on the turn? I can shift responsibility for myself from I need to win this pot no matter what so that I can feel better to how could the deck run out like this? So what's safe and most safe for me here in the moment is attaching myself to what I perceive to be a big hand. Because the river comes and he's going to lead out 4,000. And we already know from the previous hand, this is not a guy that's making $4,000 bets with like pocket tens here or with jack queen or anything. So because if I fold here and I get shown a worse hand or a bluff, it would be so much more unforgivable to the voice of judgment within than it would if I lost another 4,000. So I'm going to call here because I just want to play it safe. And I want to prove that I'm unlucky, that I deserve whatever I'm feeling right now. So again, it's never about the money. It's about trying to avoid the voice of judgment. But ultimately, when we avoid hearing what those thoughts are saying and we refuse to acknowledge what's underneath those thoughts, then we confirm that belief is true. I'm unsafe. And look, I got the result that I wanted. This is when poker stops being poker. it becomes a means of confirming what we believe about ourselves within. And we use poker, logic, or strategy to justify and confirm our underlying beliefs. So the path to freedom starts with acknowledging what's coming up on the deepest level within and what it's asking for from us in order to let go and play the game with love from an authentic, intuitive level instead of through fear, scarcity, lack, and distrust. So the takeaway from today: when we resist what we are experiencing, the energy around that resistance continues building, creating a dam-like feeling within. We are ignoring the "I'm scared, I'm unsafe, I can't trust myself, I'm not good enough, nothing is going my way." We ignore that voice to the point that we are just waiting for the perfect storm to confirm it. What we resist persists. What we continue to resist becomes our reality. Ultimately, there's no easy path. Most play poker because they love the game and because we think it's an easy way to avoid responsibility. If our intention is to show up and take the safe and easy route, poker will eventually mirror back to us what we are resisting within. At times, this process might feel very overwhelming, and that's when we get to do the work off the tables to acknowledge what's coming up and rewire our beliefs, values, and behaviors, rather than take the path of least resistance and try to use poker to make ourselves feel better.